We left off in our last video where we had put this piece that holds the LEDs into the assembly, into the wood. But I'm taking it out now because we need to solder these connections. We're going to solder this negative of the red to the positive of the green, and the negative of the green to the positive of the blue. Yours may not look exactly like this, but I have shortened the positive of the blue. The positive of the blue cannot touch the positive of the green, and similarly, the positive of the green cannot touch the positive of the red. There. So if they have to be shortened, if I cut them too long for you, cut them off just a little bit so those don't go over this gap. All right, I'll just show you one. Get them, physically as close to each other, ideally touching if you can. And then again, what you're going to do is get a little bit of solder on here, on your soldering iron. And then you might want to have some resistance so that when you push with the soldering iron against the wire, the whole board doesn't move on you. Now you're applying, again, the solder to the wire. And when the wire is hot enough, make sure you're getting try not to push too much so that these wires you're causing your whole assembly to move. If it bends up on you like mine just did, push back down with the other side of the soldering iron. And then again, touch the solder to the wire, not to the soldering iron. Just a few safety measures. Make sure that this holder is oriented this way. Make sure there's no tension on the power cable to the soldering iron. You do want to clean off your soldering iron after you've used it by wiping on the sponge. Okay, so now we have, I won't do the other one, but you will. You want to solder this one as well. This now needs to go back into this assembly. Again, these two leads on the outer end, the negative of the blue, the positive of the red, need to go down so that they will come up this way on the bottom side of the assembly. So now take your fingers or pliers if you have them and move. Oh, by the way, this board needs to be pushed up against in this direction towards the back. So now bend the wires of this is the negative of the blue, and this is the positive of the red down like this. So like 90 degrees from where they're coming out of the bottom. Give them a little space off the bottom because you're going to be soldering them. So it doesn't have to be quite 90 degrees of a bend. These LEDs need to be pointing up because you're going to be putting this board in eventually, and it needs to fit, and they need to be pointing up to touch the glass, the acrylic, and eventually. All right, so one of the first things you should do is put in your switch. The switch goes in this orientation, so the two leads are on the right. It goes so the part that you push the rocker is outside, and the rest of the switch is inside, like this. All right, so you can go in either order here. We'll start with the resistor. I'm going to start with this end that I've bent, going through here because it's going to hold it for me. I'm going to bend it over so mechanically I have something to hold it down with. And I've also bent the resistor so that eventually I can get the other end of the resistor to touch that positive end coming out of the red LED. Okay, so now I'm going to solder these two. I guess I will do it just so it will hold it mechanically for me. Again, get a little bit of solder on your iron. You might want to provide some resistance so that when you push against this, Doesn't move on you. Try not to touch your switch, the body of your switch, to melt it. Again, try to touch the solder onto the contact of the switch and not onto the soldering iron. Okay, so now I'm going to bend the resistor a little bit away. I'm going to bend the other end of the resistor towards the positive red LED lead. Try to get them as parallel as you can to each other. And then come in again, get solder on your soldering iron, apply here, heat to both wires, then bring in your solder when you think they're hot enough onto the metal. Try not to get it on the soldering iron. Okay, next. Now we're going to add the battery clip. Looks like this. Okay, so the battery clip comes in from the other side. There are two holes. The red one goes on the right hole, through the right hole. And the black one through the black hole, through the left hole, excuse me. If some of your wood, the cutout didn't happen, just push it through with a pencil or a screwdriver like I just did. Okay, so the red, by the way, there is a drawing of all this. Looks like this. It is in Google Classroom for you. The black lead is going to get soldered here to the negative of the blue coming out on the right side of the bottom. So again, you want to get it parallel. You might want a piece of tape here to tape it down. You might want to change the orientation here. Again, get your soldering iron wet. Here, get heat on it and solder these two together. I'm not going to do that to save time. Okay, lastly, you got to get this red lead of the battery clip curled around the second. Again, I would get that mechanically closed. If you have pliers, it's a good time for pliers. Onto the switch. So again, you get the red lead onto the other switch terminal. Again, apply solder to your soldering iron. And then heat to both of these. And then apply solder to the terminal or to the red wire, or both, excuse me. And if it's hot enough, it will melt. Thank you for listening.